This consensus has now made organized resistance yet more difficult. The regime has successfully masked its long-term destructive goals under a thin but opaque veneer of correcting historical injustices and restoring German dignity. The totalitarian grip has tightened, not through sheer terror alone, but through the intoxicating success of these foreign policy triumphs, which blinded many more Germans to the loss of their individual liberties and the sinister reality of the regime's expansionist agenda. As March 1935 draws to a close, Adolf Hitler has successfully crossed his first major international Rubicon. Germany is openly arming. Essential parts of the Versailles Treaty are effectively dead, and the international community has shown it lacks the resolve to stop it. Yet more of the German people, intoxicated by the illusion of restored national honor and economic recovery, have submitted to the dictatorship, leaving minorities and dissident increasingly isolated. The foundation for a militarized expansionist state is now fully publicly laid. The howls of the Nazi wolves are no longer the lonely tunes of the Austrian corporal and his entourage. They have grown to a chorus of voices from within the German folk celebrating the return of its militarist past. A haunting warning that the rest of the world has chosen not to hear. Experts estimated that the persuasion rate from anti-extremism radio content in 1930 was 36.8%. When Hitler was named chancellor, Goebbels immediately seized on this novel propaganda tool for the opposite purpose. Already in February 1933, the party was broadcasting daily propaganda formats. The potential to influence the public was on full display in the run-up to the Saar Plebiscite. This past January, GBA distributed cheap radios throughout the region and organized community listening events to broadcast highly charged emotional nationalistic appeals. The resulting 90.7% vote for reunification further convinced Nazi leaders of the value of radio propaganda. In February, radio also became a potential financial engine for the propaganda ministry. German households with a radio pay a license fee. And in a new agreement with the Postal Ministry, 55% of all radio licensing fees will go directly to the propaganda ministry. Moreover, once the total number of listeners surpasses 7 million, any additional fee revenue will be split between the propaganda and postal ministries at a ratio of 3-to-1. Money that Goebbels is eager to take, as it is rumored that his aggressive growth of control over German media and culture has been running into increasing financial trouble. This apparatus of terror was being normalized, and the rule of law was being willingly discarded also for non-Jewish Germans. In late February, Professor Victor Klempar-Andreen spoke with two of his former students who were otherwise considered anti-Nazi about the recent trial and execution of two young aristocratic women in Berlin. Renata Fanatma, employed at the ministry, and her friend Baroness Benita von Fallenheim were accused of leaking military secrets relevant to Germany's plans and preparations vis-a-vis Poland, including the top-secret deployment plans for a potential attack. They were arrested in the spring of 1934 after nearly a year in custody when they were denied several of their basic legal rights. They were tried before the People's Court on February 16th and beheaded by axe at Plutens prison on February 18th. Nazi press coverage treated the executions as justified, sensational, and unprecedented, especially emphasizing that both were noble women. Now in discussion about the case with Klempara, the two relatively liberal students found the state's verdict totally appropriate and were untroubled that the accused had been denied basic legal rights. A despair in Klempara noted that the sense of justice is being lost everywhere in Germany is being systematically destroyed. Minorities continue to be marginalized in the cultural sphere as well. When the world-renowned Jewish painter Max Liebermann, one of the leading proponents of Impressionism in Germany and continental Europe, died in February, the Nazi press did not cover his death, reflecting the Nazis' aim to purge and discredit any art they deem racially or culturally unacceptable. But this was not the only victory of Goebbels' growing media empire this quarter. It played a significant part in the Saar Plebiscite using radio. As part of their seizure of media in 1933, the regime took control of the German public radio network, transforming it into a centralized propaganda tool. To ensure maximum reach, Goebbels and T. Now, at the end of that period, the inhabitants were to decide the territo's future status by plebiscite. Continued League administration union with France or return to Germany. When the result came in, our colleague at the Universal News Services here in Berlin, Bill Shire, noted, The good Catholics and workers of the SAR voted themselves back into the Reich yesterday. Some 90% voted for a reunion, more than we had expected, though no doubt many were afraid that they would be found out and punished unless they cast their ballot for Hitler. Well, at least one cause of European tension disappears. The result was a staggering victory for the Nazi regime. This diplomatic triumph set the stage for a much more aggressive move in March. On March 10th, Hmangering officially revealed the existence of the German Air Force to the foreign press, a direct violation of the Versailles Treaty. 6 days later, March 16th, Hitler struck again. He promulgated a new law that effectively made rearmament official and eliminated parts of the Treaty of Versailles. The foreign correspondents here in Berlin were treated to a dramatic scene by Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels at his Berlin ministry. Again, I quote our friend Mr. Schei. Finally, Goebbels limped in looking very important and grave. He began immediately to read in a loud voice the text of a new law. He read too fast to take it down in longhand, but there was no need for that. Hitler had of his own accord wiped out the military sections of the Versailles Treaty, restored universal military service, and proclaimed the formation of a conscript army of 12 army corps or 36 divisions. To justify this to the world, Hitler issued a lengthy proclamation citing the failure of other nations to disarm and blaming communist chaos for global insecurity. The German people responded with jubilation, cheering Hitler wildly from the streets below the Chancellery. In late March, British Foreign Secretary Sir John Simon and Lord Preville Anthony Eden visited Berlin, March 31, 1935. Spartacus Olsson reporting from the German capital. The first quarter of 1935 brought a seismic shift to Europe. Hitler has come clean about his militaristic ambitions and torn down the blocking wall set up in 1919 to stop a resurgence of German aggression. His domestic popularity grew yet again as he stepped out of the shadows of the Versailles Treaty and into the basking light of the return of the Saal and to the K. Tonight, we look back at a quarter when Germany felt like Hitler delivered on his promise to restore the nation's military might and pride. While behind the curtain of propaganda, the Nazi terror continued to tighten its grip on the country. Globally, the opening of 1935 was still very much about the continuing struggles brought by the Great Depression. But in the Western world, the quarter was also much defined by Germany's brazen resurgence on the international stage with Hitler tearing up the post-Great War order. While that stunned the international community, the responses from Britain and France were tepid, culminating in a visit by 2 British ministers to Berlin that only highlighted their impotence. The quarter's events began on January 13th when the Saar Plebiscite took place under international supervision. Under the Treaty of Versailles, the Saar Basin had been detached from Germany after the World War and placed under League of Nations administration for 50 years. While France received ownership of its coal mines as compensation for the destruction of French mines during the war and as part of payment of reparations.